Michael Carter sat at his desk, staring at the latest customer feedback reports spread across his desk like a storm of disappointment. The CEO of Carter's Classic Eats, a beloved family-style diner chain, had built his business from the ground up. What started as a single diner in his hometown had expanded to 15 locations across the state, known for their hearty meals, friendly service, and warm atmosphere. At least that's what it used to be. Lately, things had changed. Complaints were rolling in at an alarming rate. Customers reported long wait times, rude employees, and a tense atmosphere. Online reviews that once praised the diner's welcoming charm now warned others to stay away. Even worse, employee turnover had skyrocketed. His managers kept reassuring him that it was nothing to worry about. Just the industry, they said. People come and go. But Michael didn't believe that. He had built this company on a foundation of respect for employees and customers alike. If something was going wrong, he wanted to see it for himself. And there was only one way to do that. Michael decided to go undercover. He knew that walking into one of his diners in a tailored suit with his signature confident stride would make employees act differently. He wouldn't get to see the truth, only the performance they put on for the boss. So he transformed himself. He let his usual clean-cut look go scruffy, growing out a rough beard over a few weeks. His expensive suits and polished shoes were swapped for a worn-out hoodie, faded jeans, and scuffed sneakers. He added thick-rimmed glasses, a baseball cap, and a small fake scar near his jawline. With this look, he wasn't Michael Carter, the CEO. He was just another tired customer looking for a meal. He chose one of his worst-performing locations, a diner in a suburban town 2 hours away from his corporate office. It was far enough that none of the employees would recognize him. According to reports, this location had received the highest number of complaints. It was time to find out why. As Michael pulled into the parking lot, he felt an unfamiliar mix of excitement and unease. Normally, when he visited one of his diners, the staff would greet him with bright smiles, the manager would rush over, and everything would be perfectly in place. But today, he was just another nameless face. Stepping inside, he immediately felt the difference. The diner was clean but lacked energy. The warm, friendly chatter that once defined Carter's Classic Eats was missing. Instead, there was an underlying tension in the air. His eyes scanned the room. The booths were slightly worn, and the waitstaff looked exhausted. Some employees moved with forced smiles, while others barely looked up as they worked. He noticed a young Filipina waitress, Maria, rushing from table to table, taking orders, delivering food, and refilling drinks with practiced efficiency, but also visible exhaustion. Something was definitely wrong. Michael took a seat in a booth near the window and waited. He didn't have to wait long before Maria approached him. "Hi there. Welcome to Carter's Classic Eats," she said, forcing a smile. Her name tag sat slightly crooked on her uniform, her dark eyes carrying a tiredness that went beyond just a long shift. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" Michael studied her carefully. There was something about her tone, cheerful yet strained. The way she clutched her notepad tightly, as if holding on to control of something slipping away. Something was definitely wrong, and he was going to find out what. Michael Carter pulled into the parking lot of Carter's Classic Eats, suburban branch, shutting off the engine as he observed the diner from behind his thick-rimmed glasses. It looked just like the other locations. Red and white signage, large glass windows, and a neon open sign flickering slightly. From the outside, it seemed like business as usual. But if the customer complaints and employee turnover were anything to go by, something was very wrong here. He chose this location carefully. It was far enough from corporate headquarters that no one would recognize him, and from what he had read, this was the worst-performing diner in the chain. Low customer satisfaction, high staff resignations, and a general drop in revenue, all red flags. He took a deep breath and stepped out of his car as Michael walked through the doors. He was hit with a sense of something missing. The diner was clean, at least at first glance. The tables were wiped down, the floor free of debris, and the counter neatly stacked with menus and condiments. But the energy was off. At his best locations, customers walked in and were greeted with warmth, laughter, and friendly conversations. Here, the atmosphere was tense. The waitstaff moved robotically, their smiles forced, and the few customers eating their meals seemed uninterested in engaging with anyone. His heart sank. This wasn't the welcoming, family-style diner he had built over the years. Something or someone had drained the life out of this place. His eyes scanned the employees. A young Filipina waitress, Maria, caught his attention almost immediately. She was clearly overworked, darting between tables with practice speed. She balanced multiple orders, refilled drinks, and took new requests without missing a beat. She never stopped moving, and yet, Michael could see the exhaustion in her every step, every tired blink. Maria was thin, almost too thin, her uniform slightly loose on her petite frame. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't had a proper rest in days. Yet, every time she approached a customer, she forced a small, polite smile. That kind of effort took a toll. Michael sat in a booth near the window, still unnoticed. He pulled a menu from the holder and pretended to study it. "Hi there. Welcome to Carter's Classic Eats." Maria greeted him with that same strained warmth. She held her notepad and pen, her fingers gripping them just a little too tightly. "Can I start you off with something to drink?" Michael studied her carefully before responding. "Just coffee, thanks." Maria nodded and hurried away before he could say another word. As she disappeared behind the counter, Michael's eyes followed her. Something told him that Maria wasn't just tired from work. There was something deeper going on, something he needed to uncover. And as he continued to observe, he had a sinking feeling that he wasn't going to like what he found. Michael settled into his booth, keeping his posture relaxed but his attention sharp. He casually flipped through the menu, but his focus wasn't on the food, it was on the staff. As Maria moved behind the counter to prepare his coffee, Michael observed the other employees. They all seemed tense. The kitchen doors would swing open every few minutes, and each time, a waiter or waitress would rush out, looking flustered. The few cooks he glimpsed inside seemed hurried, their movements mechanical, as if they were walking on eggshells. Something or someone was making this place a nightmare to work in. Michael didn't have to wait long to find the answer. A loud, gruff voice cut through the air from the kitchen. "Maria, why are these orders taking so damn long?" Michael glanced up just in time to see Maria flinch. She hurried back to the kitchen with her notepad in hand, keeping her head down. The voice belonged to Rick, the shift manager, a stocky man in his 40s with a permanent scowl on his face. He stood near the kitchen pass, arms crossed, eyes scanning the dining area like a predator looking for weakness. "Move faster, Maria," Rick barked as she passed by. "Customers are waiting, and I don't have time for your excuses." Maria nodded quickly and picked up her pace. She didn't defend herself, didn't even look at him, just did as she was told. Michael clenched his jaw. He had built Carter's Classic Eats on the foundation that employees should feel valued and respected. Managers were supposed to lead with kindness and efficiency, not intimidation. But Rick, he was running this place like a drill sergeant, not a family diner. Michael continued to watch as the rest of the staff moved through their shifts. None of them seemed happy. A young waiter in his early 20s, Michael later learned his name was Connor, kept his head down, doing his job as efficiently as possible, avoiding eye contact with Rick. The cooks worked in silence, their faces blank, as if they had long accepted this environment as normal. Every time Rick spoke, employees tensed up, as if waiting for the next explosion. Michael's stomach turned. This wasn't just stress, this was fear. As he sipped his coffee, Michael's ears picked up whispers from other tables. "Why is the service so slow? We've been waiting forever. The waitress looks miserable. Last time I was here, the staff was so friendly. What happened?" Michael let out a slow breath. Customers could feel the difference. A family at the booth behind him was visibly frustrated, their 2 young children growing impatient. An older couple near the entrance glanced around as if debating whether they should even stay. He had built this diner chain on a promise of warmth, quality service, and respect for both staff and customers. But this was a disaster, and he hadn't even gotten his food yet. Michael set his cup down, his mind racing. He had suspected something was wrong. But this was worse than he imagined. And he was just getting started. Michael stirred his coffee slowly, eyes still scanning the room. The tension among the employees was thick enough to cut with a knife, and the customers could feel it too. But what truly unsettled him was the way Maria moved. Quick, precise, but hesitant, as if she was constantly bracing for impact. And then, it happened from the kitchen. Rick's voice boomed loud enough to make a few customers glance up. "Maria, for the last time, move faster. I'm not going to keep covering for your mistakes." Maria froze mid-step, a tray of drinks balanced in her hands. Michael watched her closely. He saw the way her fingers trembled slightly before she swallowed hard and forced herself to keep moving. She muttered a quiet, "Yes, sir," and rushed toward a table where a mother and her 2 kids waited. She never looked up. Michael's grip tightened around his coffee mug. The way she responded, it wasn't just about work. That was the reaction of someone used to being treated like this. Rick wasn't just a bad manager. He was breaking these employees down. A few minutes passed, and Michael noticed Maria had disappeared into the kitchen. Then he heard it, a muffled sob. At first, he thought he imagined it. But as he strained to listen, the soft, choked sounds of crying became clearer. Maria. His heart sank. No employee should ever be driven to tears on the job. Michael slowly slid out of his booth, leaving his half-finished coffee behind. His movements were casual. He didn't want to draw attention, but every step toward the kitchen felt heavier. When he reached the kitchen door, he stopped and listened. Maria's voice, shaky and desperate, came through the thin walls. "I'm trying my best, okay? I haven't had a break in 6 hours, and I'm doing everything I can." Rick's response was cold, dismissive. "If you can't handle the pressure, maybe you're in the wrong job." Silence. Then, a quiet sniffle, followed by Maria whispering, "I need this job." Michael's chest tightened. That was it. This wasn't just about bad management. This was exploitation. And Michael Carter wasn't going to stand for it. He stepped forward, pushed open the kitchen door, and walked inside. Rick was about to learn exactly who he had been messing with. The moment Michael stepped through the kitchen door, the air in the room shifted. The kitchen was hot and chaotic, steam rising from the grill, plates clattering as the cooks scrambled to keep up. But at the center of it all stood Maria, her shoulders trembling, her eyes red from unshed tears. Across from her, Rick loomed, arms crossed, his face twisted in irritation. "Maybe you're just not cut out for this job, Maria," Rick said, his voice dripping with condescension. "If you can't handle the pressure, maybe you should just quit." Maria squeezed her eyes shut for a second, as if trying to hold herself together. "I need this job," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the kitchen noise. "I'm doing everything I can." Rick let out a cold, humorless laugh. "Then do better." Michael's blood boiled. He took another step forward, his voice calm but firm. "Is there a problem here?" Rick's head snapped up, his expression shifting into an annoyed glare. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, unimpressed. "This is a staff-only area. Get out." Michael ignored him. His eyes locked onto Maria, who stood frozen, her hands gripping a dish towel so tightly her knuckles were white. "Maria," he said gently, "how long have you been working today?" She hesitated, glancing nervously at Rick. "Since 7 this morning." Michael's jaw clenched. It was nearly 2 p.m. No breaks, no food, and from what he had seen, barely even a chance to breathe. Rick rolled his eyes. "Oh, give me a break. We're short-staffed. That's how it works in this business." Michael's gaze darkened. "No, that's how bad management works." The kitchen fell silent. The 2 cooks behind the grill froze, their eyes flicking between Rick and this scruffy-looking stranger who had suddenly decided to challenge their manager. Rick scoffed. "Listen, buddy. I don't know what your problem is, but you're not in charge here. This is my kitchen, and my staff will do their jobs or they can leave." Michael took another step forward, his presence commanding, unwavering. "That's where you're wrong." He reached into his back pocket, pulled out his wallet, and flipped it open to reveal his company ID. The name printed on it? Michael Carter, CEO, Carter's Classic Eats. The room went dead silent. Maria gasped, her tear-filled eyes widening. The two cooks behind Rick exchanged stunned glances. Rick? He looked like he had just swallowed a rock. His face flushed red, his bravado crumbling in an instant. Michael's voice was calm but lethal. You're not the one in charge here, Rick. I am. Rick opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Michael let the silence hang in the air for a moment before stepping closer, his piercing gaze locking onto Rick's shrinking one. Now, let's talk about how you've been running my diner. Rick let out a short, mocking laugh, though it came out more nervous than confident. He folded his arms across his chest, trying to mask the unease creeping onto his face. Right? And I'm the President of the United States. He smirked, shaking his head. Look, pal, I don't know what kind of stunt you're trying to pull, but unless you want to get thrown out, I suggest you. Michael held up his ID, his expression unreadable. Read it. Rick's smirk faltered as his eyes flicked to the name. Michael Carter, CEO. His face drained of color. The kitchen was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The two cooks behind Rick stopped what they were doing entirely, their eyes locked on the confrontation unfolding before them. Even Maria, still wiping at her eyes, stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. Rick's mouth opened and closed, his brain scrambling for an escape. It's not what it looks like, he stammered, forcing out an awkward chuckle. I mean, yeah, I get a little tough on them sometimes, but that's just part of the job. You know? Michael tilted his head slightly, arms crossed. Yelling at employees, belittling them, making them work 6-hour shifts without a break. His voice was eerily calm. That's just part of the job? Rick licked his lips, panic setting in. Look, we've been short-staffed for weeks. Everyone's got to pull their weight. He gestured wildly, his voice growing desperate. And let's be real here, some of these kids can't handle a little pressure. Maria cries at everything. Maria flinched, her eyes dropping to the floor. Michael's jaw ticked, but he forced himself to stay composed. Is that so? He glanced at the two cooks. Has she ever had a proper break since she started today? The younger cook, Connor, hesitated before shaking his head. No. Michael turned back to Rick. And what about the rest of your staff? Do any of them get proper breaks? Rick opened his mouth, then shut it again. He knew he had no way out. Michael exhaled slowly before straightening his posture. When he spoke, his voice was absolute. You're done, Rick. Rick's eyes widened. Wait. Effective immediately, you're fired. The words echoed in the kitchen, final and undeniable. Rick's entire body stiffened, his face twisting into a mix of disbelief and rage. You can't do that. I've been running this place for 2 years. You don't even know how hard it is. Michael didn't blink. You're right. I don't know how hard it is to treat my employees like garbage. His voice was sharp. But I do know one thing. This diner was failing because of you. Rick stood there, stunned, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. Michael took a step closer, lowering his voice. You've humiliated your staff, driven away customers, and created a toxic work environment. You should be ashamed of yourself. Rick glared at him, his jaw twitching, but he knew he had lost. Without another word, he ripped off his apron, threw it on the counter, and stormed out of the kitchen. As the door swung shut behind him, a heavy silence filled the room. Then, a quiet voice broke it. Is he really gone? Maria. Her voice was barely above a whisper, disbelief and relief mingling in her tone. Michael turned to her, his expression softening. Yeah, Maria, he said. He's gone. Her eyes shimmered, and for the first time since he arrived, her shoulders loosened, just a little. Michael looked around at the rest of the kitchen staff. Things are going to change, and this time he meant it. Rick was gone. For a few moments after the kitchen doors swung shut behind him, nobody moved. The air was still thick with tension, as if the employees were waiting for something. waiting for the next explosion, the next harsh word, the next unfair demand. But it never came. Instead, Michael Carter, the man they had unknowingly been serving all day, turned to face them with a steady, reassuring gaze. Things are going to change. Maria, Connor, and the two cooks exchanged uncertain glances. They wanted to believe him. They needed to believe him. But after months, years of being dismissed, overworked, and disrespected, trust wasn't something that came easily. Michael sensed their hesitation, so he did what he had always done best. He took action. He turned to Maria first. Maria, take a break. Right now. Sit down, drink some water, eat something. His voice was firm but kind. You're not a machine, and you're not going to be treated like one anymore. Maria's lips parted, like she wanted to argue, like she had been conditioned to believe that taking a break meant slacking off, disappointing someone. Michael didn't give her the chance. He pulled out his wallet and placed a crisp $50 bill on the counter. Lunch is on me. Go. Her eyes welled up, but this time, it wasn't from exhaustion or frustration. It was relief. She nodded quickly, whispered a shaky, "Thank you," and hurried off to the break room. Michael turned next to Connor, the younger cook who had been the only one brave enough to speak up earlier. How long have you been working here? Michael asked. Connor rubbed the back of his neck, looking nervous. About 6 months. Michael nodded, already making his decision. You stepped up when no one else would. You care about your coworkers, and you clearly understand how things should be run around here. Connor blinked in confusion. Michael crossed his arms. I need a new assistant manager. Someone who actually respects the team. You up for it? Connor's jaw dropped. Wait, me? I don't have any experience. Michael smirked. You have exactly the kind of experience I'm looking for. For a moment, Connor was speechless. Then, slowly, he nodded, his expression shifting from shock to determination. Yeah, I won't let you down. Michael clapped a hand on his shoulder. Good. Now, let's talk about how we fix this place. By the time the dinner rush came around, the difference was palpable. Maria, now well-rested and re-energized, moved easily between tables, no longer carrying the weight of exhaustion on her shoulders. Connor, though still getting used to his new role, helped keep things running smoothly, stepping in to assist wherever needed. Even the customers noticed the shift. Regulars who had grown accustomed to the tense atmosphere commented on how much brighter and friendlier the staff seemed. The service was quicker, the kitchen more organized. For the first time in months, genuine laughter could be heard from the waitstaff. And when Michael finally took a seat at the counter, a fresh plate of his own diner's signature burger and fries in front of him, Maria approached him with a smile that actually reached her eyes. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. Michael took a bite, savoring the food before grinning. Just keep smiling, Maria. That's thanks enough. And for the first time in a long time, she did. Weeks later, Michael Carter stepped out of his sleek black sedan and adjusted the cuffs of his tailored suit. This time, he wasn't hiding behind a disguise. He was walking into Carter's Classic Eats suburban branch as himself, the owner and CEO. And as soon as he stepped through the doors, he could feel it. Everything had changed. The moment he walked in, he was met with warmth, laughter, and a buzz of energy that had been missing the last time he visited. The diner felt alive again, just like the way he had originally built it to be. He watched as waitstaff moved easily between tables, smiling and chatting with customers. The kitchen doors swung open, and instead of angry yelling, there was steady coordination. Even the customers looked more relaxed, comfortable, happy. And then he saw her, Maria. She was glowing with confidence, her movements no longer rushed or hesitant. She smiled genuinely as she took an order from a family with 2 small kids. When she passed by the counter, she paused to grab a drink and took an actual sip, something she never would have had time for before. Michael couldn't help but smile that he took a seat at the same booth by the window, the one where he had first noticed something was wrong. But today, everything was right. A moment later, Connor walked over, now wearing a crisp assistant manager's uniform. Back again. Connor smirked, though there was still a hint of nervousness in his tone. Michael nodded. Had to see for myself. Connor chuckled. Well, I hope you like what you see. Michael scanned the room one more time. He saw employees taking proper breaks, customers receiving excellent service, and a team that actually cared about each other. Yeah. He liked what he saw. Connor cleared his throat. I just wanted to say thanks. Not just for the promotion, but for actually caring. No one ever looked at us the way you did. Michael shook his head. You earned it, Connor. You all did. As Michael finished his meal, Maria approached him, holding a steaming cup of coffee. On the house, she said with a small smile, placing it in front of him. Michael raised an eyebrow. Are you bribing the boss? Maria laughed. A real laugh. No, just saying thank you. She hesitated, then added, for everything. Michael picked up the cup, took a slow sip, and met her gaze. A business isn't just about profits, Maria. He smiled. It's about people. And as he looked around the thriving diner, he knew he had done the right thing.